Welcome to the Live and Invest Overseas podcast. Please visit us at liveandinvestoverseas.com/podcast for more information on living better and retiring well overseas. Hello, I'm Kathleen Petticord.
And I'm Leif Simon.
And we're back with a new episode of our Live and Invest Overseas podcast. We're talking real estate. Our new book, How to Buy, or I guess I keep getting the title wrong, Buying Real Estate Overseas for Cash Flow and a Better Life, has just been published, just released by Wiley last week. It's available in bookstores across the country and online through Amazon. We are taking a look inside some of the pages at some of the most practical information, kind of background educational information we share in this new and I think timely book on diversifying into hard assets overseas. It's a very big, important agenda in the current global investing climate. But if you've never done this before, it's intimidating. How do you get started? How in the world does the average person go to another country and buy a piece of property? It's a big idea. Last week, we talked about a checklist for due diligence to help guide you to be able to buy safely if you're looking to buy for investment, for profit. This week, we'd like to consider the other reason you might be looking to buy real estate overseas, and that's because you'd like to live overseas, full-time or part-time. If you're buying for personal use, for retirement or a second home, then your criteria are different than if you're buying for pure profit and return.
Right. And some of the things we went over last week will apply if you're buying for yourself. And some of the things this week may apply if you're buying for investment, but you want to change your perspective when you're looking to buy for personal use, even if you plan to rent the place out when you're not there, than you are if you're just looking for a pure investment. Pure investment, you want the best property in the best location that's going to give you the best return. When the personal side comes into it, the type of property, the location may change dramatically compared to pure investment based off of what your desires are.
Okay. And some of the best purchases Leif and I have made, I would say probably the most profitable investments we've made, big picture, have been where we've been able to marry the two agendas, where we've bought something for personal use that turned out to have a big investment upside as well. It gets complicated, and you and I have different ideas on this.
It depends on where it is on the spectrum. So pure personal use over here, pure investment over here. Yes, somewhere in the middle can be better. The main thing when we're buying, even if it is for pure investment, is it a place that we would want to spend time in ourselves for two reasons. One, usually that means other people will want to spend time there. But also, if the place doesn't work out as an investment, you end up with a place that you can use yourself and get some value out of it while you try to figure out what to do, whether to change how it's being used, rented, or reselling.
Right. Okay. So let's assume this week that you are thinking about going overseas in retirement or earlier in life, full-time or part-time, or maybe you are just looking to buy a second home in the sun for regular escapes. How do you size up one property property purchase opportunity versus another? Well, here is a checkpoint or a checklist of 9 points that we think are most important to consider in the context of buying for personal use. Number one, how much space do you need? This is a multi-part question. I'll read through it and then you can respond. All right. How much space will you need? Do you want an apartment or a house, one bedroom or two? You probably won't need more than two for personal use unless you want to have room for many family members to come stay with you. 2 levels or only one, an important consideration if you're of retirement age. A guest room or a guest house. Will you have guests often? Will you want them to be able to stay with you, or would you prefer a little space between you and them in a guest house? Or maybe you want more space, so you want 0 guest rooms, so they must stay in a hotel.
We do have this conversation with people at our Retire Overseas conference when they're talking about what they're looking for. And a lot of people fall onto that last category of, yes, I just want enough space for me. I want people to visit me, but they can stay in a hotel or they can rent an apartment next door. So, again, in retirement, you don't need much space. You can downsize to a 1-bedroom apartment or a small house. But if you are expecting visitors, if you want the grandkids to visit, then you're going to want to have room for them to stay. So take that into account. But because part of the reason you want to figure this out in advance and we say this on the investment side as well, is that buying and reselling has a much higher cost overseas than it does in the U.S. because there's transfer taxes. And so you want to buy right the first time so that you don't have to eat those costs again.
That's a really important point, which is why we say, and it really can make sense to rent at least at first. If you're moving, if your agenda is completely lifestyle and there's no investment component and you're looking to move to another country, rent first, because then you have a chance to first make sure that country is for you, that destination specific location in that country is for you, and then within that city or town where you've placed yourself, that the specific neighborhood is for you, because there can be big differences. Panama City is such a great example. It's not a big city geographically, but it's very diverse, and one neighborhood can be very different from another. And we have lived in 5 or 6 different neighborhoods, and some have been very uncomfortable or unpleasant, and some have been very great, and we've been so happy.
Right, and by uncomfortable and unpleasant, in the first neighborhood we were in, although it was an older, built-up neighborhood, there was still new construction. And so we had construction. They were literally tearing out a boulder and would start with jackhammers at 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning on every day, including Saturday. So that wasn't fun. Now that's over now, but by renting there first, we thought, okay, great. We tried the next neighborhood and the next neighborhood. And it allows you some flexibility by renting first.
And the place where we have bought in Panama City turns out to be ideal for us. It's on Avenida Balboa, right in the heart of things, where we have shops and restaurants nearby that we can walk to if we want. We have the Cinta Costera right there. We can go.
But it started out as pure investment, as a rental,
right?
And turned out long term. Now that we don't have the kids, they're off on their own. Our son's in college. We just need the 1-bedroom apartment, and so it worked. We moved in, and that worked out well. So sometimes, a personal property can turn into a rental, and the rental property can turn into where you're staying.
Personal use.
Yeah.
All right. Point number 2. Would you like to have a front yard, a back garden, a swimming pool? All of these points of amenities and space are very important to consider directly. Each one comes with a cost of care and maintenance.
Right.
And so if it's a place where you're not going to live full time, having a swimming pool can become a big complication. It requires daily maintenance, which means you're going to have someone there either on site as a caretaker or visiting every day to take care of those kinds of things.
Right. So if you're in an apartment building, the pool is going to be taken care of by the building. But if you're in a house, again, if it's not going to be rented, then if you really want a pool, you have to take into the consideration of the long-term expenses, and maybe take into consideration what is around you. Make friends with someone who has a pool. It's always better to have friends with the toys than own the toys yourself, typically.
Okay, location, of course, is always important for any purchase, but when you're thinking for personal use, do you want to be in the heart of things or out in the country? Do you want to be in a local neighborhood or a neighborhood of expats? So the location question, again, that is relevant no matter why you're buying, but there are different nuances to it if you're buying for personal use. Just what do you want your lifestyle day to day to look like?
Yeah, exactly. And so when buying for personal use, we recommend visiting the neighborhood at different times of day and different times of the week, so that you can see what's happening. We have a friend who was looking at properties in, I want to say it was in Cordoba, Argentina, which is where he was from, but he was living in Ireland at the time. After the crisis in 2002. So this was maybe 2004, 2005. He thought maybe he'd buy a place in Cordoba to be able to visit his family and then rent it out. He went and stood on every street corner, and eventually he didn't buy because he realized every street in the area that he wanted to be in had buses running 24 hours a day, and you could hear the buses. I think that's a bit extreme, but that's one way to consider a neighborhood, is to, where are the bus routes? Where, in Chicago, where I lived for years, and we're now in Illinois at the moment, and just visited Chicago, you don't want to be, the building right next to the train.
Right.
So those things are pretty obvious when you're looking at the listings, but in the U.S., but overseas,
not overseas,
you may not recognize what the issues might be.
All right. What type of property? Do you like the idea of a gated community, or would you prefer a more integrated setting, a neighborhood where you could become part of the local community? Going local means you have to learn the local language if you don't speak it already, or perhaps you prefer to be off on your own with undeveloped acres between you and your nearest neighbor. In this kind of rural setting, though, you'll need to build in your own in case of emergency infrastructure.
Right. And so, yeah, if you're in a city, that's one thing. If you're outside of a city and looking either at, say, a gated community at the beach or versus your own house on just land at the beach, you've got to take into consideration what you're giving up from the gated community. A lot of people don't want to have the rules of an HOA, but you do want some of the services that they provide. One is gated security. Not that any place that we talk about is dangerous, but if you're in an isolated property anywhere, including the U.S., you can become a target for someone to break in, take your computers, your TVs, and things like that. So if you're out on your own, you're going to want to have some security devices, cameras, maybe dogs, that kind of thing. If you're in a gated community, they'll usually have security that patrols.
All right, the convenience factor. How far is the property to shopping, restaurants, nightlife, parking, a favorite point of Leafs, and nearest medical care? That's a very important point, depending on your age and your level of health as you're starting this adventure.
For moving for retirement, the nearest medical care becomes probably one of the top topics to consider, and the nearest hospital, not only the nearest hospital, but what services can they provide? And more importantly, if you've got a pre-existing condition that requires regular visits to a hospital, can that hospital that's near the property you're looking at provide those services? So you've got to do some background due diligence on what's available if you fall into that category before you can start looking at properties, just to make sure that the area you're looking makes sense.
Exactly. So that's a good starting point. Furnished versus unfurnished. You may have no choice but to buy unfurnished, unless you buy from, say, another expat who's interested in selling his place, including all the furnishings. But buying unfurnished means you'll need to purchase furniture locally or ship your household goods from home. So you see, every decision has consequences, and you just want to think them through. Are you up for shipping everything from your current home? There are many pros and cons. We have shipped many times from many different countries to many other countries, and every time said that's the last time, but we've done it at least 6 or 7.
I say it's the last time. She says we'll see.
We'll see. And we've done it 6 or 7 times, and every time there have been good reasons to do it, and sometimes we've ended up regretting it in the end, and it is a big expense. So rather than doing that, your option, if you're buying an unfurnished place, which is mostly what you're going to be buying, if you're,
if you're buying an investment property, you can find, short-term rentals. People are selling all inclusive, including the furniture. That's how we bought our apartment in Lagos, our most recent turnkey sale, and it's how we sold the apartment. The furniture came with it. We replaced a couple of things, but all the furniture went with the sale. And when you're buying for personal use, typically you're probably not buying from an investor who was renting short term, and so it's not even going to be an option for furniture. But it could be. We sold our house in Ireland. It had way more furniture than we could take to Paris with us, and the buyer there wanted to buy a lot of the furniture, and we were happy to, because otherwise we were going to have to sell it through auction or whatever. Yeah.
So it can be possible, but likely you'll be buying unfurnished. And if you aren't going to ship a container load of household goods with you, then you're going to be furnishing locally, which I think is a big opportunity. It's an opportunity to get to know your area, because you'll have to find the stores for lighting fixtures, for dining room tables, for patio furniture, and for making new contacts and connections and becoming integrated into your community. It can be a first step to becoming a real member of your new neighborhood, a real member of the new community. And also it will help with language, because if you don't speak any of it before you set out on that kind of adventure, you're going to learn some of it, even if it's very painful. You're going to speak some of the language by the time your house is furnished. All right. Your budget. This is the most practical guideline, of course. Be clear on your finances before you start shopping. And if your budget is strict, don't be tempted to consider properties outside your price point. You'll only be disappointing yourself, setting yourself up for disappointment.
Right. What I find more often, in fact, is that people set too low of a budget. They think I'm going to go find a bargain property overseas, which you can find. And then they find what they can buy for, say, $100,000, in a particular market and are like, oh, well, that's too small, or that's not close enough to the beach.
Mhm.
And then they can afford more. And so they increase their budget as they go to buy what they want, rather than thinking that they're just going to buy an inexpensive second home or whatever. So it can go both ways. If you really only have $100,000 to spend, then that's your budget. If you've got $250,000 that you want to spend, but you're thinking you want to spend $100,000, look at what's available in both markets before you
Both budgets,
yeah.
right. And we made this point last week when we were discussing a checklist for buying for investment. But remember that if you have $100,000 to spend, you can't buy a property for $100,000.
Right.
You have closing costs, and they vary by country, and they can vary dramatically. So you want to be sure you understand the total cost of buying, so that if the total cost of buying is 8%, if you've got $100,000, you've actually got $92,000
Right.
to spend on the property. All right, one more point. Finally, ask yourself, and for me, this is the most important point of all, what kind of view would you like from your bedroom window each morning? This can be an effective way to focus on something that's, I think, the most important thing of all if you're buying for personal use, but that you might otherwise overlook. So all of the factors to do with budget and location and where's the nearest parking and public transportation, and do you have 2 bedrooms or 1, and do you have a swimming pool or no? All of that is important, of course, but bottom line, when you're looking at a piece of property to buy in another country for personal use, I really recommend take a step back. After you've done your spreadsheeting, after you've looked at all the data, you've gone through your checklist, take a step back and say, okay, if I'm living here, this will be my bedroom and that will be my view. Will I be happy with that? If I'm living here, here's my back deck and that's the view from my back deck. And this is what I'll hear on my back deck. Will I be happy with that long term?
Yeah.
All right.
And that's more Kathy's perspective. I'm happy to have the view. I look more at the numbers. You've got to do both, even when you're just buying for personal use and retirement as for investment. So take all those tips into consideration, and good luck with your buying overseas.
And we'll encourage you, go have a look in your nearest bookstore. Well, maybe you can't do that right now, but go look online on Amazon.
Amazon has the book, and if you got Prime, they should be able to get it to you the next day, so you can get started quick.
Okay. Thank you all. We'll be in touch again soon. Thank you for listening.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of our Live and Invest Overseas podcast. For more, please visit liveandinvestoverseas.com/podcast, where you'll find lots more information and resources to help you live better and retire well overseas.